coming up next.
Flavors of confidence is a really unique idea because what we're looking at is that we're all made up of a bunch of different confidences in little things in our lives. Like I'm really good at this particular thing, and I'm really good at this particular thing. And if you look at how you frame your makeup, you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, "Man, I wish this was better. I wish this was better." And if you start looking at the things that you wish you could improve and you improve those things, then you in turn improve your whole being. And that is your unique flavor of confidence, because what you need to be confident and work and walk in your path in life is inherently different than what I need and require to be confident in my life. And so the ultimate goal is getting to know yourself and taking that true inward look at what is going on with you and finding those small things to improve.
Welcome to Faith Over Addiction podcast, where the chains of fixing and striving are broken and joy is rediscovered in Christ. You're here because you know there's more for you, a life beyond addiction's chaos, rooted in God's peace and promises. This is the place where Christian women like you learn to release the weight of fixing and striving and instead lean into God's strength to create a home filled with love, grace, and hope. She is clothed with strength and dignity. Proverbs 31:25. That's you. You may not feel like it yet, but you are stronger than you know. And God has so much more for you than carrying someone else's addiction. Here, we'll uncover how to set healthy boundaries with love and a little humor. Find resilience and grace in the messy moments of life. Celebrate small victories and embrace joy like never before. Lean into God's promises for restoration and strength, because He's not done with your story or your loved ones. This is your invitation to rise up, embrace your worth in God's kingdom, and take back what's been stolen by addiction: your peace, your joy, your future. Your faith is the foundation, and your boundaries are the bridge, and God's truth is your guide. I'm Tanya Gioia, your host and fellow traveler on this journey through the chaos of addiction. I'm here to cheer you on, equip you with tools that work, and share the truth that's changed my life. The joy of the Lord is your strength. Nehemiah 8:10. Together, we'll uncover how to create safe, loving space for healing, starting with your own heart and home. By setting boundaries, trusting God's plan, and embracing His truth, you can reclaim your joy, your peace, and your family's future. Then you will be able to stand firm for your family and legacy as a kingdom daughter, a woman who can laugh at the days to come, knowing her identity is secure in Christ. So grab a cup of coffee or tea and get comfortable. Let's walk this journey together. We're about to take back what's been stolen, create a safe, healing space for you and your family, and rediscover the joy God has waiting for you. Welcome to Faith Over Addiction, where we are helping women return to their identity in Christ, build themselves up so that they can fill up those around them that are struggling with addiction. Not fill from their 100%, but fill from their abundance in Christ and create a safe, happy home life that offers healthy boundaries for those who are struggling with addiction. And I have Massimo Rigotti with me today. He is the founder of the Sober Method, and this is what caught my eye: Flavors of Confidence. So Massimo, tell us a little bit about your work and how you got where you are today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on the show today, Tanya. I really do appreciate it. So I came to this new path in my life through having a very horrible addiction myself. So I grew up in a really good home, and I had some childhood trauma, as often happens in these cases of addiction. But I also happen to be bipolar, and you
Mm.
smack those two things together, and me refusing to accept that diagnosis in college caused me to turn to drinking and eventually drugs. And luckily, I was a high functioning alcoholic, so I was actually pretty successful in life. Yet
Yeah.
eventually, it really reached a point where it just all start unraveling all at once in about 2012. And that was rapid fire of losing a business, my marriage collapsed, and ultimately I ended up on the streets homeless in December of 2014 and still drinking. I took about 18 months for myself to get myself standing up again, and it's been a rocket ship of growth ever since. And what happened in the middle there is shortly before I became homeless, I met a young lady, Samantha Thomas,
Mm.
in Florida when I was there March of 2014. So I guess 9 years ago now. No, 11 years ago now. That's been a
Yeah.
while. um, and she just immediately saw something in me, which I didn't see myself, and that I needed to put my demons behind me. And she invested a lot in ensuring that I stood up. And Flavors of Confidence actually comes from a self portrait she did of herself that she gave me in August of that year. What occurred in 2020, though, was that she was actually murdered by a drunk driver in a horrible
Mm.
accident. And
Mm.
it brought things full circle. By then, I'd already created what is now the sober method, and she had been encouraging me to write a book and to get the word out and to do this. And when she was taken, it just was, it was in a way, it was that interventional point that I needed to say, okay, I'm going to do this. And I've kind of doubled down on it. I got the first book out, and then I got a second book out in 23, and this is what I do now. I do everything I can to help others find their flavor of confidence and become sober and remain sober.
Wow. Those are some hard things that happened to bring you to where you are today. When you think back and you're looking at untreated bipolar, what would you tell moms, sisters, daughters they have the opportunity to help their loved ones with?
I think that they pay attention quite well to and are, have that innate ability to see that the struggle is happening to those around them, which is just fantastic. Yet we men are not always the most receptive to those that try to help us because we try to find ways to say that we're strong enough to do things on our own.
Mm.
And it's very interesting to me because there are two different approaches in my own experience that got me back to where I am sober today. My mom took a very tough love stance and trying
Mhm.
to correct my addiction. Uh, and whereas Samantha was very the nurturing and there on a daily basis trying to ensure that I was taking the steps necessary to become sober. But walking that back to discovering that I had bipolar, I hid that. It's not something that I let out of the bag or ever told anybody. And it's only since I became sober that I was willing to admit that to anyone. So there
Mhm.
wasn't really a way that anyone could have helped me because I didn't allow anyone in. Now, if anyone was paying enough attention, I think they probably would have picked up on the signs
Mhm.
that I was struggling. I'd have big bouts of mania where I'd be up for 4 or 5 days at a time, and people noticed that, but nobody stopped to question, well, what's going on with you?
Mhm.
um that in retrospect, had there been more questions of me, it may have been
Mhm.
discovered and may have kept things from occurring. But I think that gentle approach is what works best, is not necessarily telling, in my personal case, don't tell me what to do, instead suggest that things might be better if you did this. And that kind of coaching methodology works really well
Right.
for me. If I have someone, a partner, or anyone in my life, a family member that says, "Hey, I notice you're trying to do this. Would you like some help?" That immediately I latch onto that, and I think that that's a very positive way to do it.
How does that fold into your flavors of confidence and your sober method?
Flavors of confidence is a really unique idea because what we're looking at is that we're all made up of a bunch of different confidences in little things in our lives. Like I'm really good at this particular thing, and I'm really
Mhm.
good at this particular thing. And if you look at how you frame your makeup, you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, "Man, I wish this was better. I wish this was better." And if you start looking at the things that you wish you could improve and you improve those things, then you in turn improve your whole being, and that is your unique flavor of confidence, because your what you need to be confident and work and walk in your path in life is
Mhm.
inherently different than what I need and require to be confident in my life. And so the ultimate goal is getting to know yourself and taking that true inward look at what is going on with you and finding those small things to improve. And as you gradually improve those things, your confidence improves. And as your confidence improves, then you're able to move in a much more deliberate way in your life. And I think that this applies to anybody. It doesn't necessarily have to apply in sobriety, because I've found people that aren't battling addiction at all use the sober method to help them improve themselves. So that's obviously very um, makes me very happy to see that.
And that's exactly what I was gonna ask is this applicable to the families who are loving folks who are struggling with addiction?
I absolutely believe it is. Yes, because the support system that is around somebody is instrumental in the ability to recognize that there are challenges and that this person is having challenge. And if the support group around someone is stronger and understands themselves, then in turn the person struggling is going to rise with them. It's kind of like a all tide will rise all boats type of scenario here, because
Yes.
if the family and friends that are around someone struggling are unified and feel strong in their own environment, their own daily life, and their own path, then that is going to inspire the person struggling to become more like them, because you tend to be the most like the five people you spend the most time with. So if you're spending time with a bunch of people who are struggling maybe with addiction themselves, then you're also going to struggle with addiction. But sometimes it's hard to get out of that. And so I encourage with those that I coach doctors, like, look at who you're around. Are you in a situation that is not going to help you? And oftentimes I'll find that they are, and they might
Mhm.
be in a bad pattern with a maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a spouse, whatever that is. And if you can create that distance, oftentimes they'll improve their overall well-being.
That's I love that you say that. It is that and biblically we talk about that too. It's the people you're with. You know, are you going to continue behaving in this way, or are you going to choose a different way? My thought, Massimo, went directly to the mom, the wife, the daughter who says, I must be failing because this person I care about can't seem to take hold of the lifelines that I'm throwing, or in sometimes in my case the anger or all those types of things came out, and that's not the person I wanted to be, but the frustration was there, you know. So I'm looking at these flavors of confidence. If their support system did that, felt more confident, felt more clear on their healthy boundaries and who they were and what they did well. Can you give us some examples of the flavors of confidence? Where do you pick out, yeah, I do this really well, and yeah, I do that really well?
Well, the overall method, start so sober the sober method, it stands for stoic, observe, behavior, execute, and restore, and it works in a continuous improvement process. And one of the reasons, even though I'm a man of faith myself, I ground it in stoicism is because I wanted to ensure that it appealed to absolutely anybody and there
Mm-hmm.
wasn't going to be any pushback. Because if you really truly look at Stoic values, they're definitely Judeo-Christian values,
Well,
without a
Paul
doubt.
was writing out of a lot of what the Stoics were talking. I mean, he knew the Greek and the Hebrew. He was kind of that window into both
Yes.
sides. So you can't read Marcus Aurelius without going, yeah, that fits in over here. So I hear
Yes.
you there. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so one of my favorite examples to give is, and this is a famous Marcus Aurelius, is the obstacle is the way, is the very short version of that verse. But whatever is in your way becomes the way. That is your path in life. And that applies
Mm-hmm.
to everything. It's probably one of the most profound statements that you can possibly think of because we often will take the easy path. That's just, I don't believe that humans are lazy. We're just engineered to take the most easy path to get where we want to go, you
Right.
know? And so you can't look and blame yourself for that. So giving a practical example is like if you were to you just brought up meditations. I recommend that you look at an individual verse in meditations and then take that apart. So if we took about the obstacle is the way apart, I would think about when is the last time that something was difficult and I did something that was not what I should have done and I had a bad outcome.
Mm.
Okay. And then I will pull that apart in my mind and look at it as like, well, what should have I done? What would have been the best path to take? And what may have happened if I took that path?
Mm-hmm.
And what steps would I have to improve about myself in order to have the strength to take that path? And so that's how you start to unravel it and work through in your mind. It's a big mind exercise, really. And then once you have that down in how you might change, then you want to put it into practice. And that's where you go and you actually test this. That's the execute step of the whole process, where you actually go and say, okay, I'm going to go do something that I know is hard, that is difficult in my life right now, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to challenge myself to do it the proper way, the hard way,
Mm-hmm.
and see how it goes. And if it doesn't go well, then you go back and you do another observation of yourself. Why didn't it go well? You kind of picking apart your individual actions to ensure that you're making forward progress. And once you get to the end of this, is the restore step. You're looking back and actually going to those that you may have made these poor decisions with and go, you know what? I made a mistake a couple months ago when we were doing this, and I just kind of blew it off and said, it's no big deal. And I let you make a mistake in your own life. And I should have said something. And now,
Mm-hmm.
and so, and that's how you're kind of making your amends and pushing forward. So the practical step in all of this is just really taking that inward reflective that we do. I mean, and as Christians, I'm a Catholic, this is something that you do on a daily basis in prayer. So you're like that is that normal time to reflect and to think about these things and to ask the Lord for help when you need the help and the strength to get to the next step. And I'll tell you, the interesting thing, the more that I've used my own method, the closer I personally have improved my relationship with God. And I think that's because I find myself much more deeply reflecting and listening to what is happening within my own mind rather
Mm-hmm.
than making decisions that are very irrational and quick. They're very
Mm-hmm.
much more deliberate. And we
Mm-hmm.
don't give ourselves enough pause in today's world to really make good decisions. And I think that's why we face so many challenges in what we do and dealing and working with others. Because oftentimes, if you just take a deep breath and think about what somebody just said to you, you'd respond in a much better way.
We could end the interview right there. That's exactly it. Is we're not always aware of what the triggers are and we're acting out of the old behavior of the trigger, especially as people who love someone and we see them hurting. We know there's a problem, but we have no idea what to do about it. And we're acting out of that trigger. how do you help people? I love the acronym, the sober acronym. How do you help people create that pause? I think that's been the most difficult thing in my life, knowing I don't want to behave this way, but suddenly I am behaving that way.
It I think it just takes time. I would like to say that there's one thing that occurs that gets you to that point. Yet I can tell you again and again, those who I worked with and those who have used this method, they get there eventually. And I see them begin to talk with much more definitive, their pauses in their speech, that you can tell that they're stopping, that they're actively listening to the person in front of them. And you just brought up triggers. This is something that is, of course, huge for dealing with addiction because we don't know what the trigger is for someone else. We
Mm,
we don't, and we may not even know the trigger for the loved one sitting in front of us because they obviously don't know it, or they wouldn't still be addicted.
mm-hmm.
Because I have yet to meet an addict that said, "I want to remain an addict forever."
Yeah, raise my hand. I'm going to stay like this forever. Yeah.
I've not yet met one, but there might be one out there. But everyone would rather be healthy and figure out what that pain is that is keeping them from having the life that they see others having.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a little bit of envy that's in that thread, and that is the one thing that I work with a few people on these days as well, is that some of the underlying addiction challenges actually is bent on wanting what they can't have, or what, they live in social media land and they think that they should be able to have all of these things, yet
Mm,
not put in the work and the energy and the effort and the time required to achieve their own greatness. So rather than do that, they take again the easy path and they find themselves drinking. So what will occur is that you will be able to watch people and see like micro triggers. I'm very aware of it now in ways that I never thought I'd be able to communicate. I really am able to watch somebody in person. It's more difficult when we're remote, like you and I talking right now,
yes. Yes.
but in person, I can see little micro triggers and faces and realize, oop, I'm stepping on something a little. And then I turn that into a question where I might be telling them what might work. And I recognize I stepped somewhere maybe I shouldn't. I will turn it around. It's like, well, how did that make you feel right now? I sense that, maybe this may have occurred. And then you'll get corrected and they will tell you. And then you are able to find out that, oh my goodness, you just discovered something about me that I just like glazed over my whole life and didn't even see. And that just is remarkable. That makes you feel great.
Absolutely. This seems like a non sequitur, but it's not. I was watching a podcast of someone who is up and coming, and he was interviewing a guy on coffee. It was rather innocuous, but he kept moving the books on his table. He was moving it from here to here to here to over there, and then he'd stack them up again, and then he'd move them over there. And it made me think, hey, what's going on for you mentally? Can you see something behind him? Is there a clock? Is there a producer? Is there some, this was an in-person one. Is there something going on? So when you say microfacials or the tone changes or that hand fidget
Yeah.
starts or the jingling of change in the pocket, or this one I find a real dead on clue, subject change, immediate
Yes.
subject. We're not, I'm not even going there. In fact, I've switched subjects all along. So what would you suggest when someone notices those, especially if it's a loved one? Do they talk about it right then, or do they take it back and ponder it and say, okay, how do I bring this up? Or, like you said, ask a question. You've had years of practice to formulate these. So they're gentle questions, they're easy questions, instead of going, well, why did you just do that? To impale them.
Yeah, you don't want to take a sledgehammer type of approach
No.
to this. Actually, you said exactly what I recommend in the beginning. If you notice something like that, catalog it, take it back, and break down the conversation as the loved one trying to provide care. Think about what you were talking about that led into it and see if you have enough cues that maybe you can put together what you may have triggered, like maybe what they were thinking, and then come back with a very, ease into it in a future conversation where you say, hey, we were talking the other day and I noticed, that I may have made you a little uncomfortable. I feel bad about that. So put it back on the
There
loved
you
one
go.
giving care, saying, I really felt bad. I feel like I made you uncomfortable that, saying this. Is there anything you would like to tell me that to ensure that I don't do that to you again?
Yeah, to take full responsibility for it.
You have taken the weight off the shoulder of the person that you love, that you're trying to help, because no longer do they feel responsible to carry that burden. You have just open the door for them to deliver whatever is bothering them directly to you. You've taken all the weight on and put it on your shoulders. And it works. I mean, I would say most of the time it does, because people feeling that unburdened sense when you're an addict is huge, because they feel like they're walking around with the weight of the world on their shoulders when and they can't do anything about it, and no one will understand what I'm going through. And that's the mindset. And so if you can open that door just a little bit, you'll get a lot.
So I've asked the question, I've taken the responsibility. They feel safe. I get a flood from them. Now I feel triggered. Now what do I do?
Well, I mean,
I hear things I don't want to know, really. I care about you, but there's something, especially as moms, we're really like, could we not?
yeah,
But so I
I
get
can see
flooded,
that.
and then what? What do I do then? What do I do with this information?
Well, if you're able to process it and it doesn't trigger you, then you say, "Wow, you've given me a lot to think about." Um, I'm going to make sure that I don't bring this up again. But do you mind if we come back to this later and talk more about it? Or if it's something that does trigger you, it's like, wow, that's just this might be even more than I could handle. Would you, can we, hit pause on this conversation? And would it be okay if I maybe talk to your dad about this? Like
Mhm.
like and see whether or not you could open another door for them, that they would be okay to have the same communication with somebody else. You bring up that mom example, and I can see where that could potentially be a challenge in some conversations, where you might want to talk to somebody else, or you don't want to know certain things, right?
Absolutely. Well, and the idea of, okay, now that I know more, I know that we really need help. We need an
Mm.
intervention.
Mm-hmm.
Just checking back with you, it would sound like that would not be the time to bring up that part of the conversation. You've created this safe space. So the last thing I would think is, okay, now we need to do this, and I'm getting you an appointment, and suddenly you're over here, and da 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 da.
You,
What? How do I calm? How do I calm myself down to go? Oh, okay, now we got to deal with it. I think
well,
that's why we
uh,
sometimes don't even open that door, because we're like, oh, if I know, I've got to deal with it, and I have no clue
yeah.
on what to do next.
I think that this comes back into the top of our conversation here, why it's so important that if you're providing care, you have to have the strength to provide the care, and just caring is not enough, and to understand that if you don't provide yourself with enough tools, that it will be very challenging to continue. In the very beginning of the Sober Method book, I encourage, and it's like, if you're an addict and you're reading this, please give a copy to whoever you are
Mm,
closest to, so they
mhm.
understand what you're trying to accomplish. And because I think that's just like vitally important. But into the specific here that you just asked me, um, I think that that's just navigation that will be challenging on a case by case. You don't want to. It's kind of like having a nice, fluffy little bunny. You don't want to jump at the bunny, or the bunny's going to run away. The bunny just told you everything that you wanted to know. So now you
Right.
have to, like, oh, you're doing okay, but make sure that the reaction that you provide the person is not one that is going to ultimately scare them away, because now you've got them to open up to you. So this is a net plus. So if you could just pull yourself back and then recollect, talk with others about what is going on, to try to say, what should I do? What might be the best path here? Um, it's it's a challenging thing. I'm not going to say that there's a single answer. That's why I'm struggling to give you a single answer, because there's so much nuance in these types of human interactions, as you know.
Well,
There's so much history.
I think you did. I think just by saying this is a net plus, just the conversation is a win. Because often people who are caregivers are fixers and doers. Just the conversation is enough. Go away. You know, do the
Yep.
solid face, hug the bunny, go away and sort through the other stuff
Yep.
on your own, because you said this earlier, when you were diagnosed with the bipolar, then the simplest thing seemed to manage it with alcohol and drugs. I mean, you were managing it.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't being managed in a way that you were as functional or as aware as you want to be, if I can put words in your mouth, but you were managing it. And that's what I see so often, especially with teens, is they're managing the social anxiety or whatever, the ADHD, whatever's going on. They're managing it, but it's the parent who can oversee, you
Mm-hmm.
know, says, huh, yeah, and this is going to not end well because they've seen it before, but the teen hasn't. But I love the bunny idea. That means brings me back to Samantha was very nurturing. Your mom was doing tough love.
Mm-hmm.
Give us the difference between the two. And you gave us that questions really worked, open-ended questions really worked better for you. But give us the difference between the two of what you, it's more of what you felt, I think.
Yeah. Well, in the case of my mom, it was it was just, I'm very disappointed in you. You have so much potential. What is wrong with you? Why aren't you going to turn your life back around? You've lost everything. Do you want to amount to nothing the rest of your life? You know, those were the types of, it was very just negative. And it got to the point where she said if I came by to say hello at the house again, that she was going to call the cops and have them pick me up, because she knew I was driving drunk. And she said I've just had it. And so that was one side of the equation. and
Mm-hmm.
and that's hard, because you're kind of raised in this environment where we're taught that your mother's love is like this thing that you can count on. And I was like in my ultimate struggle, and I was, that's what I was getting.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom, who said she prayed, I mean, like years later, she tells me, she goes, well, I prayed a lot about that when that was going on, and that's what I, came to feel was the right thing for you at that time. I'm like, okay, who am I to judge what happened there in your relationship with God? And as for Samantha, she was so nurturing. She's like, it's okay. You made this mistake today. Now, I want you to tell me, what were you thinking right before you needed that drink?
Mm-hmm.
She's like,
Mm-hmm.
what was going on? And so I would tell her, and she's like, well, why did that happen? Why did that little thing make you suddenly just fall apart?
Mm-hmm.
And then we would dig deeper into that. And it was just her constant checking on me. Is everything okay? How can I help? And that made me feel very safe. And she constantly told me, I know you have the ability within you to get past this.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to want it. And
Mm-hmm.
you know what, that was probably the most prophetic thing that she told me, was that you just have to want it. Because I did not reach a point where I became sober until I woke up one morning, and I literally just told myself, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. And that was the last day I drank. March 23rd of 2016 is my sobriety date. So
Oh, you're coming up on an anniversary here soon.
yeah, coming up on 9 years. So that was what it took. Samantha was right. And but then, then you go into that recovery mode of, I had a relationship that I felt was very damaged with my mom that took 3 or 4 years to actually rebuild because I
Mm-hmm.
felt a lot of anger towards how she treated me. But
Mm-hmm.
as the years have gone on and I've worked with more and more people helping them, I understand that there was some value in what she did
Mm.
because you honestly you want to feel like someone is holding you accountable because if everyone's nurturing you, I don't know that you necessarily would get better because
Mm-hmm.
that was a driver as well. I was disappointing my mom and that hurt. It hurt on some level.
Yeah.
Eh,
And that's some of what they talk about with the AA groups is you need someone who's been there who can call you out when you're feeding yourself. It's not really other people. When you're feeding yourself lies and delusions and that all this is okay, there has to be that person. How they do it, your mom was saying you have a lot of potential. I really expect you to do great things. Da, 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 da. She just said it in a way that tipped it so you couldn't hear it. And I think that's where your method, there's other methods out there that have said, okay, how do we set healthy boundaries and say positive things when we can, and then say, I can't be with you when you're
Mhm.
doing this, you
Exactly.
know?
Yeah.
So, again, your example of taking the responsibility on yourself, holding that bunny, not squishing the bunny. Bunnies don't like to be squished. Not
No,
squishing
no.
the bunny, but also if the bunny starts to scratch and bite, to let go.
Yeah. You just you have to let go. And that's why I use the little bunny because everyone can relate to a cute little bunny. And that's why I use that oftentimes to explain how you interact. I think it really kind of sums that up. You can picture it in your mind.
So tell us a little bit more about the two books. Where can people find those? But give us a quick synopsis of what they're going to expect.
Sure. So my first book, which is Flavors of Confidence, a reflection of those in need, is my memoir. It's my rise through multiple industries, culminating working in Hollywood and the entertainment business, representing talent, printing company, all sorts of different things. I ran multiple companies. Then my crash and burn on the street, and what life on the street was like, the interesting characters I met, and then the rise back to doing what I do today. And so it's a really interesting tale. The end of the book ends with what at the time I was calling the Flavors of Confidence method, but it was a 10-step method. It was kind of clunky, and I was having trouble like teaching people how to, what do I do in this step? So I went back to the drawing board from feedback and reframed it as the sober method,
Mm.
and which we already talked about. And so I came out with the second book, which is sober method. That's all method. There's a little bit of a forward, about 10 pages, where I talk about how Samantha and I framed up the ideas that became the sober method and some of that interaction between us, and so you get an idea of where the whole method comes from. But then the rest of the book is just like a pocket size version of the sober method with an ending chapter on device addiction, which is something that I'm spending a lot of time talking to people about these days.
Just took YouTube and Facebook off my phone. I'm like, I can't handle this. I'm as hooked on shorts of my favorite short or whatever as anybody. And I'm like, okay, we're just gonna eliminate this and create a Sabbath for the phone. And I'm like, we have just you I'm far from a teenager and I just tipped in. I got stressed out and tipped in.
Yep.
Massimo, thank you so much for being here. You are still actively coaching.
Yes.
Who are the people that should seek you out for coaching? What problems do you solve, and who would be your favorite people to work with?
My favorite people to work with are those that are truly struggling with a lifelong addiction and nothing else has worked. The really complicated cases, Those are the ones that I really like diving into. Like, I've tried everything. I've been an addict for 20 years, or I've tried everything and my job is going to disintegrate if I don't figure something out.
Mhm.
So there's like a time crunch involved. I'm always up for a good challenge, so those are the ones I like to work with. Obviously, I do a lot of interviews like this, and it's been wonderful speaking with you today. You can find my content at all social media handles is Sober Method, and sobermethod.com is the site, and also MassimoRigotti.com is my personal site. My books are available on Amazon or anywhere books are sold.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for your laughter. I always want to bring that in and say, don't take yourself so seriously, right? We can work this out, and there's a good community to do that. So thank you, Massimo, for being part of that community.
Thanks again.
Thanks so much for tuning into the Faith Over Addiction podcast. Remember, nothing changes until something changes. Today is your day to step out in faith and make a difference. You are a daughter of the King, a woman who can spark incredible ripple effects of hope and healing, not just in your own life, but in your family, your community, and God's kingdom. If this episode encouraged you, bless someone else by sharing it. Send it to a friend who needs a little hope, or post it on Instagram and tag me. I'd love to hear what resonated most with you. And hey, if you're ready to reclaim your God-given identity and create a safe, loving space for yourself and those you care about, let's talk. Book a quick call with me today, and I'd love to hear your story and help you take the next step. Oh, and don't forget to head over to Apple Podcasts, search for Faith Over Addiction, and leave me a review. Your feedback not only makes my day, but helps other women find this podcast and step into freedom too. You are strong, you are loved, and the joy of the Lord is your strength. Nehemiah 8:10. Until next time, keep walking boldly into the life God has for you.